running down the half guard. He reels it in at the 15. Cooper Kupp has the catch.
The greatest D tackle ever right here.
It's good. Mike Williams with the grab.
Feeling fresh as hell.
Chargers lead 29-28. The Trojans have won the Rose Bowl.
There he goes. Kashmir Allen, 2 long receiving touchdowns, and now a kick return touchdown. This day belongs to Kaz.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Show right here on the LA Football Network. We are everywhere you get your podcast. Just search LA Football. Also on YouTube at LAFB Network. And of course, on the great website, LAFBnetwork.com. Our city, our network, your football programming. Joining me, as always, Jamal, the Madman Madney. What's up, my brother? How we doing? Welcome to the show.
How's it going, Ryan? Happy Tuesday in the heart of summer in Los Angeles to you.
It's a beautiful day. Yesterday was like a scorcher. Today, I think it's going to get a little warmer later in the day, but I was out for lunch. It was like 82, a little breezy. It felt great.
Absolutely.
How's it in your neck of the woods?
Oh, no, absolutely delightful. I think it's suns out, guns out time here in West LA. I think.
Oh, yes.
Ready to show off the Instagram body to, sort of get that traction for the summer. So
yeah,
that's what it looks like. I
didn't even think about it. Today is summer solstice, first day of summer, longest day of the year, June 21st. You
Yes.
doing any outdoor celebrating in the, won't get dark till probably 8:45 night or whatever?
Yeah, Ryan, we're I think gonna kind of just maybe take a stroll around the neighborhood. We're still kind of recovering a little bit from all the travels of the last month. So we're sort of enjoying kind of the lounging at home, but we'll take in, we love to sort of go on some nice afternoon walks around the neighborhood, take a drive out to the beach. So
there you go. That'll be great. Yeah. Obviously, who doesn't love longer days and the sunshine here in Cali, but one, if I can turn it pessimistic a little bit, my daughter, I obviously love spending time with her, but when you're any parent out there knows when you have a young kid, you love them, but when it's time for their bed, it's like a break. Like, okay, you can kind of have some me time, pour some brown stuff, a little whiskey, watch some programming or something. And her bedtime is usually between 8 and 8:30. And as it stays light longer and longer, it is really damn hard to put her down when the sun is beaming through the window. So that's the only thing I'm like, well, it looks like I won't have my me time till after 9 o'clock tonight. That's what it's looking like.
That's awesome. Kids are so perceptive, it doesn't matter what the clock says. It matters what the window says. So
yeah, exactly. It's like the sundial. They know. Before we get into the show, I got to mention our partner of the LA Football Show, betonline.ag. Go there today on mobile or desktop. Use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Still got hockey to bet on. You got baseball. About to be the only sport live really, but there's plenty of futures bet on our Rams and Chargers. You can also bet on Trojans and Bruins. So you can place those now for, division winners, MVP races, stuff like that. So betonline.ag, again, promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV. Head there today and hopefully win some cash. But Jamal, I'm going to let you do the rundown. What are we talking about today? Tell the good people.
Well, Ryan, I think it's going to be exciting to talk about the USC recruiting bonanza over the weekend. Sort of Lollapalooza meets USC, it felt like on social media and around. And so we're going to get into exactly what that weekend looked like and how this is sort of setting up as sort of the next chapter of USC's recruiting strategy, where they're really leveraging Hollywood and the entertainment industry. And then I think after we segue there, I think you and I are going to have a really fun conversation on the Mount Rushmore of Los Angeles football across the 4 great football franchises here in LA. So that's going to be a really fun debate.
Yeah, it's just a tease that I'm still trying to really, as we on the fly, narrow down my 4. We had kind of talked beforehand, like, okay, do we just keep it strictly LA football? So that throws out the greatest show on turf Rams, that throws out, 50 years of Chargers football, essentially. Or do we just say as franchises, the Chargers did start in LA in 1960. It was their first year. They got their name. For those that don't know, I'm sure Jamal, they got their name the Chargers because of the horns at Dodger Stadium, the charge, and the owner at the time liked it, and that's what he named his AFL franchise, Chargers. So they do, have roots in LA, and obviously they're back. So we decided anyway, long-winded way of me saying it, that we're going to stick to all 4 franchises, which gives us a lot of very, very good players to narrow down to 4. It's going to be very difficult. I'm curious if I feel like we'll at least have one of the same. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. But I wonder if we're going to have 4 teams represented, truthfully. I think that's going to be the challenge. And I have my doubts.
Yeah, me too. It'll be tough. So we shall see. But anyway, let's talk USC. I'll let you kick it off. This Lincoln Palooza at the, I guess, crypto. It's still weird to me, but I like the Crypt. The Crypt is kind of a fun, catchy name. Eventually we'll catch on if crypto.com doesn't go out of business here in the next 6 months with all the crashing going on. But what'd you think? USC is back, baby. The sideshow that is USC recruiting is in full swing.
No question about it, Ryan. What a weekend. Obviously incredible sort of approach to things. It was a weekend-long extravaganza with 7 really elite 4- and 5-star recruits that spanned 3 days, parties at Lincoln Riley's beautiful new home in Palos Verdes, lunch,
humble home
on Father's Day at crypto.com arena, really sort of, melding USC and the Lakers together with, obviously everyone forgets that Dr. Jerry Buss was a chemistry professor at USC and then left to sort of start a real estate business on the side. And that's what made him the wealth to be able to acquire the Lakers and the Great Western Forum at that time. So there's tremendous synergy with the Lakers and USC there. And so an incredible showcase. And I thought what was really interesting is that, the headliners were Malachi Nelson, Zakaria Branch, and Makai Lemon. Those are the 3 5-stars. Obviously, Malachi Nelson is the heir apparent to Caleb Williams in a couple of years here. All 3 of those guys are 5-stars, the quarterback and 2 receivers. Those were the 3 commits to USC, verbal commits, and they were sort of brought in with 4 other elite blue chip prospects that are yet undecided. And so I think using those 3 individuals as recruiters as well to help lure in the mystique that is USC. And 2 guys in particular were really, I think, the eye of Lincoln Riley's affection and focus over the course of this weekend. One is Mateo Uyagalele, who is DJ's brother, who is, a 5-star recruit, one of the top defensive lineman prospects, if not the number 1 guy in the country for the class of 2023. And so a lot of focus there with him and his dad and really sort of tying that in. And I think it's just a beautiful strategy here. Even over the weekend, it was announced that Malachi Nelson has signed a name, image, and likeness deal with H. Wood, which is a conglomerate of different, consumer-facing entertainment and hospitality businesses started by 2 USC Trojans, one who was a former walk-on the football team. And so you're seeing this next evolution take place where USC is really leveraging the LA market, their alumni base in LA, along with Hollywood, to really drive recruiting prowess strong. And it's the next chapter in this iteration. In the 2000s, we saw it with Pete Carroll making practices open, bringing in the likes of Will Ferrell, bringing in the likes of Snoop Dogg to practices, giving Leinart and Bush all of this media access, the red carpets at all the different, movie premieres and nightclubs. And then when you sort of go all the way back, Ryan, even in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with folks like OJ, before the term white Ford Bronco became sort of, imbued in American pop culture, everyone forgets OJ was maybe one of the 5 most marketable athletes of his era. And that was really come about from, his sort of pedigree at USC. Marcus Allen followed that. And Rodney Peete was very involved in entertainment, married Holly Robinson Peete at the time, who was an actress. And then you sort of go all the way back. The first great USC football player was a guy by the name of John Wayne. And so this sort of intersection between sports and entertainment has really been the ethos of USC from day one. And now we're sort of seeing this next iteration play out with name, image, and likeness and things like NFTs, and SC really sort of double clicking on who their identity really is.
You could even look at in the 90s with Todd Marinovich, right? And how marketable he was, and
No doubt.
big
And
name
Keyshawn.
for
Absolutely.
Keyshawn. I mean, then you have the linebacking core when you get after that with, the great Ray Maluga and Clay Matthews and all that defense, right? Paul Amalu. I mean, the list goes on. And it's, first off, can you imagine being an 18-year-old kid in high school, Los Alamitos High School, and signing an NIL deal where you're just going to get that's all the cream of the crop at 18, or I don't even know if he's 18 yet. Maybe he's still 17, but it's like crazy this world we're in now. And but what's funny to think about is, and I could be wrong on this, so if anyone out there listening knows for sure, I've said many times, like, obviously I know Lincoln Riley, he's one of the best coaches in the game, one of the best recruiters, but I wasn't like really watching Oklahoma football and their recruiting process. But to my knowledge, I don't remember it ever being this Hollywood, to put an easy word on it. It was just like, okay, come play football in Oklahoma. We have rich history. And to see him tapping into what you just talked about in that, great little monologue about the history of SC and the way it was show business, right? The recruiting process was show business. I remember talking to, Frosty, who played there in the heyday, Frosty Rucker, and the stories he would tell of the recruiting process at SC. And even once the recruiting was over, and you mentioned, opening practices up, but they would have during those days, and I'm curious if this will happen too, on like before game days on like Thursdays or Friday nights, you usually have like team dinners. They would have like Chris Rock come and speak at their team dinner. And, all these famous comedians would come and just speak to the team, because they were LA. Not only were they LA football, but they were just such a commodity in the city that is Tinseltown, that is show business. And they totally bought into that. And so it's really fun to see them really get back into that. I'm curious, your thoughts, Jamal. Is that Lincoln Riley being a genius recruiter and knowing that he wants to get back to those roots? Or is that USC and Mike Bone and Carol Folt, even president, and just some of the higher ups and boosters saying, if we want to live in the glory days, we need to recreate the glory days and bring them to 2022? Do you think it's them? Do you think it's Lincoln Riley? Or do you think they're just in a beautiful collaboration? And when he came to town, said, let's think forwardly, but also kind of think backwardly and how we bring that back?
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, it's a great point. And I think obviously Riley gets a lot of credit, but I don't think that Riley is this sort of genius recruiter by any stretch of the imagination. I think this was a conscious effort by the boosters, the board of trustees, President Folt, to say, look, for USC to be USC, football has to be great. And USC is just, it's the three. I went to USC as an undergrad, Ryan, as you know. It's sort of the 3 F's of USC: film, fraternities, and football. That's sort of the holy trinity of USC. And when SC's humming, all 3 of those dimensions are really sort of as great as they can possibly be. And I think that was a conscious decision. When you offer Lincoln Riley 9 figures, and when you're willing to pay for his home in Palos Verdes, you have that in mind, that this home is going to not just be a sanctuary for him and his family, but this is going to be a platform to host lots of different recruiting events and branding events to really showcase USC's place within Hollywood. It's really interesting, Ryan, that you mentioned, about LA football and USC. And folks really sort of forget this in terms of history. SC was founded in 1880, started playing football in 1888. They were the dominant team. When you look at the first half of the 20th century in Los Angeles, there were only 2 forms of entertainment. There was the growing Hollywood industry and the silent film era and sort of the evolution there. And it was USC football. Everybody forgets that the first great era of USC football was in the 1920s and the 1930s with Howard Jones. And USC won 4 national championships in the 20s and 30s. UCLA football only joined the Pac-8 conference at that time in 1928 SC and UCLA played twice, and then UCLA paused the rivalry for 5 years between 31 and 35 because they needed to sort of build up a team to be competitive with USC. And so when you sort of factor that in with the fact that, look, the Rams only moved to LA from St. Louis in 1946. The Dodgers only came from Brooklyn in 1958. The Lakers only came from Minneapolis in 1960. And when you think about Wooden and the great UCLA basketball, that was early to mid 60s to the mid 70s. So that whole first half of the 20th century up until 1950, USC football was the only game in town, college or pro. And when you sort of factor in the only two forms of entertainment being USC football and Hollywood, there was a natural synergy there where even in the silent era in the 20s and 30s, the USC quarterback was dating the most famous and most beautiful and most popular stars. And it's one of the many reasons why USC football is still so closely attached to the identity of this city, and why even now, yeah, the Rams won the Super Bowl, Ryan, and I know you're an NFL guy. It's going to take a hell of a lot more than one Super Bowl for this city to be converted, because the whole first half of the 20th century was all USC football. And I think many people still believe that USC football is the glamour team, college or pro, in this city.
And when the Olympics came here and they built the Los Angeles Coliseum, they built it on the USC campus, essentially saying like, this is the forefront of Los Angeles. It's this school, it's this campus, it's this football program, and we can double down and use this to showcase our Olympic athletes as well, which USC has produced a lot of those as well in different sports and track and field.
To your point, the Coliseum is where the Dodgers played before Dodger Stadium was built. The Coliseum is where UCLA football played until 1982. UCLA only got the lease to the Rose Bowl after the 82 season. And so SC and UCLA actually shared the Coliseum all the way up until 82. So the Coliseum in many ways was the epicenter of Los Angeles sports. And obviously the Rams played there, the Raiders played there. And so, geographic, historical, there's a lot of reasons why this city is so tied to USC football, and the way it's tied to UCLA basketball, and the way it's tied to the Lakers and the Dodgers and so forth.
Do you think, and I believe it will, but we can talk about it a little bit, because obviously the prowess of USC has, since the Pete Carroll years has fallen off. Obviously, there's just, even when they've had some winning years, but the turnover of coaches, the scandal, the death penalty essentially getting, and then you mentioned, now we have all the teams, and the Dodgers have won a World Series. The Lakers have won 17 championships. We have the Rams and Chargers here now. The Kings went on a great run, and in hockey right there at Staples, now Crypt. And so there's so much more to do than just have USC football. But now we have Lincoln Riley here. We have this belief in, we get in debates all the time just in the LAFB Slack channel about like, is it hype or is it real? But the hype is real for sure. And there's definitely an excitement around this program again. And now we want to see if that leads to 75,000 fans at the Collie on week 1. And will it be the talk of the town on radio? Because even till this day, if you tune into ESPN radio, here we are in June, they're talking Lakers and Dodgers still all day, every day. Rams won a Super Bowl. Lincoln Riley's here at USC. It's still Lakers and Dodgers with a few segments here and there. Do you think USC can get back to that epicenter, or will it always be, one of 10 teams here in LA that are always vying for public sports? Because they're going to be definitely big again, but will they ever be the team in Los Angeles?
Ryan, I think there's only 4 teams that have the ability to be the team in LA at any one given time. And I think it's the Lakers, it's the Dodgers, it's USC football, and it's UCLA basketball. I think those are the only 4 teams that have the ability to be the team in the city. But it also, a lot of different things have to play out in order for that to happen. Everyone forgets that in the heyday of the Carroll era in the mid-2000s, SC's first national championship was 2003, obviously the repeat in 2004. And, the Texas Rose Bowl, in January of 2006, that was the 2005 season. That was really the heyday. look at the landscape of sports in Los Angeles. Shaq and Kobe just broke up. The Lakers broke up in 2004. Lakers were headed for a total rebuild. Clippers were a non-starter. Nobody knew who the Clippers were. The Angels won sort of a fluke World Series in 2002, but couldn't really replicate that in any way, shape, or form. The Dodgers were going through total chaos under the Frank McCourt regime.
Yeah, the McCourt years. Yeah.
Remember the McCourt case, the huge divorce case. There was this ownership struggle, and they were really struggling to really be relevant as well. And there was no NFL football. So SC was sort of the epicenter of LA sports, not only because of their brand and pedigree that they had the ability to do so, but just circumstantially, look at all those other teams. And so now moving forward, more of those things need to happen in order for SC to really be the epicenter. Like LeBron's going to have to retire, and AD is going to have to really sort of actually do exactly what he's been doing the last couple of seasons. And, some
fake AD, not the real AD, not Aaron Donald,
exactly.
Anthony Davis. Fake AD.
McVay's going to have to retire soon. And, when you factor in, the Dodgers are going to have to slow down. And so I think it's going to take a lot more for SC to be the team because there's a lot more variables at play. But even if they are a team, one of the 3 teams or 4 teams that everybody talks about, it's still going to generate incredible buzz.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There'll always be one of the teams, and it brings up a fun debate. And we want to hear from you guys, listeners. We have a debate actually up on LAFBnetwork.com. You can access it by texting the word LAFB to 31032. We want to hear from you. Who is the most, what do we call it? The most integral or historical or iconic, I guess. Yeah, there you go. Iconic Los Angeles sports team. And we have Dodgers, the Lakers, USC Trojans football, UCLA men's basketball, and the Rams, just because the Rams do have a lot of history here, a lot of great teams before they moved to St. Louis and obviously win the Super Bowl last year. So we want to hear from you, the listener. Text LAFB to 31032 and let us know what you think and join that debate. So the last thing about this, Jamal, and then let's get to our Mount Rushmore. And I don't know why I just thought of this on the fly, but we always talk and not we always talk, but in LA in general, it's like, okay, it's Lakers over Clippers. Obviously there's a lot of, I think there's, a strong Clippers fan base. It will never be the Lakers fan base. It just won't. The Angels will never be the Dodgers, even though the Angels are obviously a little more Orange County, but they're trying to be LA. The Chargers, I love what the Chargers are doing. We cover the Chargers on this network. So it's all love for them, but it's really an uphill climb against the Rams just because of the history the Rams have and still the tie that people still see to San Diego with the Chargers. And then with, hockey, you have the Kings versus the Ducks. I think Ducks have their little thing in Orange County, but Kings have a much larger fan base. Do you see, and obviously fans, you pick whoever you want, obviously, like they're not saying don't do that, but do you think there's value in these sports franchises saying, okay, we need to understand where we stand, right? Like, obviously you want to be the best, be number one. You want to always shoot. You want to market yourself for that. You kind of want to understand, like, okay, like it's not hard for people to realize everything I just broke down. I think that's pretty black and white. Everyone kind of knows that's how it is. If I was, say, the Chargers, and this is probably way off topic, but it kind of goes in line with iconic, right? And you see like the Chargers tweet, like, let's go Lakers or this, or let's go Dodgers. Like we're Chargers at the Dodgers game. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but to me, it almost makes sense. Like, you know what? We know what the chips are stacked against us. Let's tie our wagon to the Clippers, to the Angels, and to the Ducks. And that's going to be kind of our 4 is like, let's find the new fan that says we are these 4. Be a fan of all 4 of these teams. We can do maybe some ticket packaging together or something. And then you have, Rams, Kings, Dodgers, and Lakers, because that's kind of how the fan base has gone anyway. Am I talking crazy, or does that kind of make sense from a marketing standpoint?
Brilliant. I think it's brilliant, actually, because I think that's what they should be doing. Because the way those, and, I wrote an article about this, Ryan, in terms of unlocking LA rivalries. The way you think about it, obviously, is sort of the incumbent teams and then the challenger teams. And I think the way the challenger teams sort of find their niche, find their fan base, find their place, is they have to target the folks that are looking for a new team or have just moved to LA, who aren't maybe sort of folks that have lived here 20, 30 years and sort of understand the history to the degree that some of the native Angelenos do, and folks that have kind of come here for their first job or have come here for, after starting a family, or, those individuals that are really kind of can identify with something new and fresh. And I think that there's tremendous value in that. And where I also see a lot of value, Ryan, is I actually think even at the collegiate level, there probably needs to be some sort of a nil understanding that isn't spoken, but I think strategically between USC and UCLA. I think SC has, and I think SC is already starting to do this, where I think SC needs to put the vast majority of their resources between football and basketball into football and just really say, hey, we're going to try and be perennial top 5 in football every year, and we're going to put all our resources and all our ideas into football. And I think UCLA actually needs to do the same for basketball, because they are in a position to be perennial top 5 every year in their respective sports. And I think at some point you sort of have to make that decision to say, do we want to be top 5 in one sport and kind of top 25, top 30 in another sport? Or do we kind of just are trying to be good in both, but we're sort of maybe not going to reach national championship status in either? And I think if SC actually sort of goes all in on football and UCLA actually goes all in on basketball, and they sort of eliminate the friction in those two sports of who's sort of alpha and who's beta, they can, I think, both be even better in their favored sports than they are today. So I think it goes at the collegiate level, and I think it goes at the professional level, where you got to really know who you are. There has to sort of be a really deep self-awareness of your identity and what is the fan base that you're attracting. I think a bundling package with sort of the incumbents and the challengers, I think, is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. And just to counter your point on the collegiate level, because I agree with you on the surface, but I think what UCLA benefit they have now in terms of when you look at football is the transfer portal, and they can, still be able to build and compete that way without using resources for, all in on recruiting and whatever. And that's a whole different conversation, but you can still have that very competitive football team rivalry with USC without losing any of your identity with men's basketball, which is where their identity, is and probably should be overall. And so it's fine. I know a lot of Charger fans that are Laker fans, and I know a lot of Rams fans that are Angel fans. So it's not like there can't be crossover, but it makes sense to me for these teams to say, you know what, let's hitch our wagon to each other. And, I don't think any Clippers fan or personnel would say we're bigger than the Lakers. I think they know where they stand. And why not, do the same with the other teams? I think it could be, hey, if I could buy Charger season tickets and I get Clippers and Angels and Ducks tickets also, why wouldn't I do that?
Ryan, so much of it is location also, if you really think about it, right? Where if you look at the Angels, like their stadium is in Orange County. That's not technically LA. For people on the East Coast or other parts of the country or other parts of the world, maybe they sort of see it all as LA, but it's really not.
No.
When you think about the Clippers and them being in San Diego for so many years, and then coming here, and you have an owner who has such a deep tie actually to Seattle more than he does to LA in Steve Ballmer, the location, the Clippers still feel very foreign. And I think it's the same challenge that the Chargers have, because they've been so iconically the San Diego Chargers. It's going to take a little bit of time to really sort of think about the LA Chargers. That's still not a very intuitive sentence, Ryan. The LA Chargers. I don't say that just off the top of my tongue and off the top of my head. There's still sort of a couple of milliseconds where even I hesitate even now when in saying it. So, and when you talk about the Ducks, they're also down in Orange County. So location matters so deeply here. And I think that's, bringing it back to our original point. I mean, that's why USC football is so iconic, because they were the first team here in LA, since 1888. So it really sort of speaks to that.
Yeah. Interesting. Ballmer's, building the new Clippers arena, which I think is a great step. They need to get out of sharing with the Lakers, to get out of their shadow, have their own space. Building, it's going to be a beautiful arena. I mean, it'll be nicer than Crypto.com arena when it's said done. Obviously, it's much newer, but with the tech advances that he has, and they're going to do an Oculus board in it. But I find it interesting. They're building it right next to SoFi in Inglewood. And I thought the play would have been to do it in Orange County, just to say, we got the Ducks, we got the Angels. Let's go to Orange County. We'll take that market. We'll be we can still be the LA Clippers. We play in Orange County, but no, they're staying in Englewood, which, it'll be fine. And it'll be nice right there by SoFi for sure. But for sure, being that close, Chargers and Clippers need to do something. There needs to be some partnership between the Chargers and Clippers. But anyway, moving on. So make sure, join the debate. We'd love to hear from you. Text LAFB to 31032. You can select which team you think is most iconic, and you can leave your opinion in the comments also. So, all right, Jamal, let's get to our Mount Rushmore of LA football. It all ties together. So this is going to be extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. So we'll go one back and forth. So don't tell me all four. I'll throw to you first. Who are you putting on there first? And again, for those this isn't a live show, so I assume you listened to the beginning of the show, but if you didn't for some reason and skipped ahead, we are including the Rams, Chargers as franchises. So we are including the greatest show on turf years, even though that was in St. Louis. We're including the 50 plus years in San Diego, just because they were founded in LA and are back in LA now. So all players that have played for the Rams, Chargers, Trojans, and Bruins are allowed. Just if you say Kurt Warner and everyone's like, well, he didn't even play in LA, but we're allowing it for the sake of debate. So I'll let you start with the tough task.
Ryan, I'm sort of trying to do it in phases a little bit, because this is so challenging. I probably have about 7 players that are sort of my finalists to try and find 4 spots for, truthfully. And I think it goes with, I think, the 3 greatest USC Trojans of all time. And that's a hard debate between OJ, Marcus Allen, and Reggie Bush. Yep. And then when I think about the Rams, I think of
you can't say them all. You can't say them all yet.
And Marshall Faulk. And I think when I think of the Chargers, I love Dan Fouts, but you think LaDainian Tomlinson. And unfortunately, I don't think I love UCLA, probably as much or more than just about anybody else in this city. But I think it's a hard sell to see anyone UCLA football crack that list. So I think that's my 7. And then it becomes really hard to go from that 7 to the final 4. But that's kind of my initial thinking right now.
Yeah, I would have at least Kenny Easley from UCLA in the debate, but do you put him above Ronnie Lott? Do you put him above Troy Polamalu? Do you put him above Darren Smith? When you look at just safeties, it's tough, and all the other great Trojans. So, I'm with you. It's if you go for just pure dominance in their era, it'd be hard not to have 4 USC Trojans, if we're being honest. If you just go for pure dominance, I know there's been some phenomenal Rams players. There's been some phenomenal Chargers players. I mean, you talk down the list of Lance Allworth and obviously LT, like you mentioned, but you could even get to Kellen Winslow and, those Eric Coryell years that had so much dynamic and changed the way football was played, to be honest. I mean, quarterbacks didn't used to throw for 4,000 yards every year, and Dan Fouts and Kellen Winslow and all those guys, they made it happen. And you can go back in time with the Rams, and this is where I'm going to start. Oh man, it's just so hard. I don't know. Who are you starting with? I tossed you first. You can't toss it back to me. Who's the first player?
I think the one person I'm fairly confident in is Marcus Allen. I think for everything that Marcus Allen did for USC in terms of single season rushing record, 2,342 yards his last year at SC, Heisman Trophy. He was the culmination of that running back legacy at USC when you start all the way with, Mike Garrett and Charles White and Anthony Davis and Ricky Bell and OJ. And he was the last of that chain and really the culmination there of everything that he did. And then when you couple that with winning a Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Raiders, being an NFL MVP and a Heisman winner and NFL Comeback Player of the Year,
and Super Bowl MVP.
Allen, Super Bowl MVP. I think Marcus Allen to me is safe as in my first slot, of the 4 slots on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. I mean, everything you said is correct, but I'm going to keep him off. And here's why. Wow. Even though he is the only player ever to win all those awards that you said. The only player to win a Heisman, a national title, an NFL MVP, and a Super Bowl MVP. But I'm going to put OJ in instead of him. Again, we're talking strictly football. So, don't everyone freak out at me. We're not talking off the field, strictly football. And here's why. And I think my list will kind of demonstrate my thinking anyway. And it's the way he changed the game, how good Marcus Allen was, the accolades, the stats, they all hold true. But OJ changed college football, not just for his play, for being juice, but for what he did in, changing the recruiting style, changing the Hollywood prowess of college football players. They were not now just student athletes anymore. They were players that obviously at the time there was no NIL or anything, but I'm pretty sure he was getting NIL back in those days. And a lot of the USC players were because of what OJ did and what he did on screen and in LA. And then he goes on to Buffalo and obviously rushes for 2,000 yards for the Buffalo Bills. So, I mean, you could argue either way for the great running backs that have put on the Cardinal gold.
I actually have OJ on the Mount Rushmore as well. And so, we're not sort of disagreeing there. I think the thing that, the one thing Marcus Allen couldn't do was win a national championship at SC as the lead back. And, when you look at OJ basically played in arguably, there were many games of the century in college football, but certainly in terms of West Coast football, the de facto game of the century was 1967 USC UCLA. OJ obviously stole the show. He won the national title. He lost to Gary Beeman in the Heisman that year, even though SC won the game. And then the following year won the Heisman by the largest margin of victory ever at that time. And so in terms of, I totally agree with you, in terms of complete dominance, I think OJ, changed college football, certainly on the West Coast, forever.
Yeah. So, okay. So you got both OJ and Marcus. I've got OJ to start. I'm going to shift to the Rams now. And this is where it gets very hard for me because I got two I'm debating and I'll name both of them. I'm not going to put, I may end up putting both on. We'll see. But I've got Deacon Jones and Aaron Donald. And you look at Aaron Donald, I know he's still playing and still young, but he's going to, when it's said and done, he will go down as, I think, the greatest defensive player of all time. People will argue between him and Lawrence Taylor. But I think Aaron Donald has proven that he is, for sure, it's 1A or 1B, right? Like the greatest defensive player of all time. You look at Deacon Jones, though, created the sack. There was no sack statistic until Deacon Jones. And so his sack total could potentially, I know people have now broken it down to what it actually was before it was even calculated, just because you can obviously watch the game film and figure it out. But any player in any sport, that a stat is created because of what you do. Yeah. And not only that, the head swat was outlawed because of Deacon Jones. So not only was a stat created, but a sack move was then outlawed and considered a penalty. So for that, I'm like, okay, Deacon Jones, I know he doesn't get the same name recognition as Aaron Donald, but when you have that kind of influence on the game of football and you played in the fearsome foursome with Jack Youngblood and with some of the great defensive linemen, but you were the face of it, I don't know what to do between those two. Who would you put in?
Yeesh. Yeah, I'm going to have to sort of change up my list as we keep talking. I'm sorry to say that, Ryan, because Deacon Jones obviously revolutionized the game. And Deacon Jones in many ways was the Bill Russell of the NFL, right? When you think about, in Russell's days, the blocks weren't a category and he sort of invented the block. And then it was sort of a category only after him. And so there's so much to be said for that. And then obviously with Aaron Donald and everything that he's done, obviously we all know 3-time defensive player of the year, 8-time first team All-Pro. It's him and Taylor right now are probably pound for pound the two greatest defensive players in the history of the NFL. It's tough. There's a recency bias, obviously, with Aaron Donald. But I think I would love to see Donald be the de facto greatest defensive player of all time. I think if we're really just sort of pulling at hairs right now, I think to be on the Mount Rushmore, I would love to see Donald create some separation between him and Lawrence Taylor. And I think he can obviously do that. And he's coming back for the next 2 or 3 years, I think, to do that. And so I think the answer will probably change for me 2 to 3 years from now when he actually hangs it up. But I think right now, if you told me, taking everything into consideration, and this notion of contextual dominance is so important, because today's day and age, Ryan, everybody just wants to count things. And, 8 today doesn't mean 8 40 years ago. And that's where we really lack as a sports analyst community so much. But for me, I think I'd go Deacon Jones right now.
Okay. I'm going to put them both on for now. And I'm going to say my fourth, and then I'll let you say your fourth and see if it changes my mind. But for now, I can't keep either of them off. I just can't do it. And both, obviously, being that they both played in LA. So it's like true LA icons and what they've done for the sport and the dominance that they both did, playing theoretically the same position. So I'll put them both on for now. And for my fourth, and I'm curious what you'll think of this, but I actually get to knock out 2 teams with 1 player. And I'm going to put Junior Seau in as my fourth. Wow. The highly touted recruit that chose, USC and, started that kind of 5-5 club as the middle linebacker, from I think he's from Oceanside, right? So he was a local kid in a sense. Just the dominance he had at USC, the charisma he had at USC, kind of that true Hollywood smile, right? And he changed the game in that regard of like being this mean middle linebacker that was the big teddy bear off the field. And then he goes and gets drafted and plays for the San Diego Chargers. I know it was San Diego. We're talking LA, but we're including both. And he became the city of San Diego. He, had Seau's down there. He was a larger than life personality. And obviously he was one of the most dominant linebackers of his entire time. And, RIP to the great Junior Seau. But I think when you look at football accolades and off the field context of what he meant to both programs, to both cities, because he stretched from LA to San Diego, obviously, I have to have him in my Mount Rushmore. And that smile would look pretty damn good etched in stone up on that giant rock.
Well, it's a beautiful analysis, Ryan, and you're not going to get any argument from me. I think the world of Junior Seau as a player, as a man who sort of tragically left us, far too soon, and so no question about it that he deserves to be on the many Mount Rushmores, not just in LA football, but great linebackers in NFL history, USC Trojans, on and on the list goes, toughest guys. Greatest men in football, so many lists. For me, Ryan, though, in looking at it, and again, I'm sort of cheating a little bit because I'm debating between 2 people. One is I can't have an LA football Mount Rushmore without Reggie Bush, and who was the most electrifying player in college football, who basically redefined the modern era of college football and single-handedly made USC. Everything we talked about, the Carroll era of the 2000s, was because of Reggie Bush. I was there at the time. I love Leinart. Leinart was kind of a pretty face who couldn't really throw the ball very far. We knew Leinart was going to be a bust, year 2 of him at USC in the pros. We knew Leinart was just kind of, he was sort of a slot on a team who just, didn't have to screw things up, a la Ken Dorsey of Miami. Reggie was the centerpiece of that USC dynasty. And he completely changed the game in so many different ways. 8 yards a carry his Heisman year, which is a staggering number to think about in the Pac-12, and just, putting the ball behind his back, literally, against Fresno State, the flips against UCLA in that iconic 04 game, the Bush push against Notre Dame to keep the winning streak alive and stretch it to 28 games and eventually reach 34 games. I can't not have Reggie. And then the other guy is Kurt Warner. I mean, if we're really going to sort of focus in here, I mean, the architect of the greatest show on turf, again, revolutionized the NFL into what a lot of the NFL is today. 2-time MVP, Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl champion. So for me, it's an OJ, the Marcus Allen, Reggie debate. with Kurt Warner, and then with sort of a debate between Donald and Deacon Jones. I think that's kind of my now 6, and I gotta get it in 4. And I agree. I think I gotta make a choice between OJ and Marcus Allen to slice that one. A choice between Donald and Deacon Jones to slice that one down.
So what's the choice? Who's it going to be? I got my 4.
I think I agree with you. I think I'm gonna go OJ, Reggie Bush, Deacon Jones, Kurt Warner.
OJ, Reggie Bush, Deacon Jones, Kurt Warner. Okay. It's a great, both great Mount Rushmores. So my final list is OJ, Deacon Jones, Aaron Donald, Junior Seau. So we want to hear from you. Same number, same text LAFB to 31032. That debate we'll have both debates in the same article. So you can debate on who's the most iconic LA sports team and debate on the Mount Rushmore. I'll just put both of our lists up and we can decide what the people think, who they think is the better Mount Rushmore.
And this was so hard, Ryan, to think about. My first guy was Marcus Allen. I was like, oh, I feel pretty safe about that to sort of open with, and I knocked him off with 20 minutes. So it tells you how difficult this was.
Oh yeah, and not even like I love Kurt Warner, but it's like Marshall Faulk was great. Isaac Bruce was great. It's like, it's so many great LA players. And I think that just speaks to the volume of LA football and the history of LA football and the beauty that we are now getting back. We kind of take this show full circle now. And the beauty that we are now getting back to the LA football that this city knew back in the day, with USC and Lincoln Riley now rising to the top, with UCLA and what Chip Kelly's built over the last 4 years, and how they're fighting for Pac-12 contention. They're utilizing the transfer portal in ways that other teams are not. The Rams winning the Super Bowl and how they have just this dynasty built, and they've changed how football works in terms of trading draft picks and roster construction, and how the Chargers have maybe the brightest young quarterback coach duo in Justin Herbert and Brandon Staley. So there was like LA football dynasty with USC to begin the 1900s, a giant lapse in there for a little bit. And now in the 2020s, we are finally full circle and seeing this LA dominance. And this Mount Rushmore maybe will look a lot different in 20 years.
Absolutely, Ryan. And it's the most exciting time in the history of LA football, and thrilled that LA Football Network, LAFB, is really going to be at the epicenter of this. I think, Ryan, it would have been easier if we just sort of omitted the Rams and the Chargers, in their non-LA days, and sort of kept it exclusive to that. But I think this was a really fun debate.
Yeah, it would have been harder. But what's funny is my list may have actually stayed the same, because you still have Seau at SC, OJ. And
I think if we went pure LA, I would have gone OJ, Reggie, Deacon Jones, and Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
That would have been my 4 then. And I would have
Aaron Donald for Kurt Warner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way. And I think if Donald plays another 3 years, I'm sure you'll probably slide Donald in anyway. So, because I totally get what you're saying on that regard. If he hangs him up and he is the unquestioned #1 defensive player, then I don't think there's much debate.
And we're that way.
Yep. Exactly. So, all right, Jamal. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up. That's going to be it for the LA Football Show on a beautiful Tuesday, summer solstice here in Los Angeles. My friend, you are the man. Thank you as always. Appreciate you.
Ryan, thanks so much as always. What a fun summer show. This is what these summer shows are all about. We don't have football during the off season, but we can get into these great debates of players and histories and geographies, and it makes for just as rich a conversation, even not more so. And, it's such an honor and privilege to do it with you.
Exactly. My privilege and honor is all mine. Thank you all for tuning in to the LA Football Show. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search LA Football. You'll find us on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you listen. We're on YouTube at LAFB Network, website, LAFBnetwork.com, our city, our network. Make sure to head there for all your LA football needs. For Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dybert. This is the LA Football Show. Same time on Friday. We'll see you then. Enjoy the beautiful weather and the long evening. We'll talk to you in a couple days.